Growing up, my grandmother made me feel like her favorite, showering me with love, until her will was read and I discovered she left everything to my brother. Because he was the carrying name of the family, leaving me broken and wondering if her love was real, or just another lie disguised as tradition and preference for a son. I was 28 when I destroyed everything good in my life, and it started with a text message from my grandmother's lawyer. State reading tomorrow at 2 p.m. Simple words that would unravel 30 years of what I thought was unconditional love. Growing up, I was Grandma Rose's golden boy. Every Sunday dinner, every holiday, every random Tuesday when she'd call just to hear my voice. She'd slip me $20 bills when mom wasn't looking, bake my favorite cookies, tell everyone at church how proud she was of her special grandson. My brother Jake got the polite smiles, but I got the bear hugs that lasted too long. The whispered "you're my favorite" when no one else could hear. Sarah, my fiancée of 3 years, used to joke about it. "Your grandma loves you more than she loves oxygen," she'd say, laughing as Grandma Rose fussed over me at family gatherings. Sarah was right there beside me through everything. The late night calls when grandma was sick, the hospital visits, the funeral planning. She held my hand when we buried the woman who raised me after my parents died in that car crash when I was 8. The will reading was supposed to be a formality. Everyone knew Grandma Rose loved me most. Jake lived 3 states away, visited maybe twice a year, never called. I was the one who moved back home after college to be near her. I was the one who fixed her leaky faucets and drove her to doctor appointments. I was the one who held her hand as she took her last breath. The lawyer's voice was mechanical as he read through the document. Small bequests to various relatives, donations to her church, her jewelry split between the daughters-in-law. Then came the big one. The house I'd grown up in after my parents died. The house where I'd learned to ride a bike in the driveway. Where I'd brought Sarah to meet the most important person in my world. To my grandson Jacob Michael I leave my home and all remaining assets, totaling approximately $30,000-40,000, as he carries forward the family name and will ensure our legacy continues through his future sons. The air left the room. Sarah squeezed my hand so hard I thought my fingers might break. Jake looked as shocked as I felt, his mouth hanging open like a fish gasping for air. The lawyer kept talking, but all I could hear was white noise and my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. "There has to be a mistake," I whispered, but even as I said it, I knew there wasn't. Grandma Rose had been old-fashioned about everything. Women should cook, men should provide, families needed sons to carry on traditions. I'd heard her say it 1,000 times, but I thought her love for me transcended all that backward thinking. I was wrong. Jake tried to talk to me afterward, standing in the parking lot of the lawyer's office like we were kids again fighting over toys. "Look, this is crazy. We can figure something out. Maybe split it or..." "Don't," I him off. "Just don't." Sarah drove us home in silence. Our apartment felt smaller somehow, like the walls were closing in. Everything I'd believed about my place in the world had been built on quicksand and now was sinking. "Baby," Sarah said softly, reaching for me as we sat on our couch. "I'm so sorry. This doesn't change anything between us, but it did change everything, because as I sat there staring at our engagement photos on the coffee table, all I could think about was how Grandma Rose used to tell me I needed to marry the right kind of girl. How she'd make little comments about Sarah's job, her independence, her lack of interest in having children right away, how she'd ask when we were going to make it official, and give her great-grandsons to spoil. Sarah was everything I'd ever wanted in a partner. Smart, funny, ambitious kind. She made me laugh when I was stressed about work, held me when I cried about missing my parents, supported my dreams even when they seemed impossible. She was supposed to be my wife in 6 months. But sitting there in the wreckage of my inheritance, all I could hear was Grandma Rose's voice echoing in my head. "The family name dies with you if you don't choose wisely." That's when the started seeping in. That's when I started wondering if maybe my grandmother had been right about more than just the inheritance. Maybe she'd seen something in Sarah that I'd been too blind to notice. Maybe she'd known that Sarah wasn't the right kind of girl for a man who was supposed to carry on traditions, build something lasting, create a legacy worth passing down. The thoughts felt foreign but they wouldn't leave me alone. Sarah went to bed early that night, emotionally exhausted from watching the man she loved get his heart broken by the woman who'd raised him. I stayed up scrolling through social media, looking at my friends' lives, their wives and children in houses with white picket fences. That's when I saw her. Melissa Chen from high school, now Melissa Rodriguez. Divorced according to her recent posts, living 2 towns over. Still beautiful, but in a softer way than I remembered. More traditional. The kind of woman who posted pictures of homemade meals and talked about family values. I stared at her profile for minutes before I sent the message. Just a simple "Hey, saw you on here and wanted to say hi. Hope you're doing well." Innocent enough. Harmless. Sarah was asleep next to me when Melissa replied an hour later. "Oh my god, I was just thinking about high school the other day. You look great. How have you been?" I should have turned off my phone. I should have gone to bed and held my fiancée and remembered all the reasons I'd chosen her over everyone else in the world. Instead I typed back. That was the beginning of the end. 3 weeks into texting Melissa, I told myself it was just friendship. Old classmates catching up, sharing memories, venting about life's disappointments. She understood the inheritance betrayal in a way Sarah couldn't. Melissa had been passed over for her brother too, watching him inherit their father's business while she got a pat on the head and a lecture about finding a good husband. "It's like we were raised to believe we mattered," she wrote one night, only to find out we were just placeholders until the real hairs came along. Sarah noticed my distraction. Of course she did. "You've been weird since the will reading," she said one morning, catching me smiling at my phone over coffee. "I know but we'll figure this out together." "We always do." I nodded and put my phone away. But Melissa's good morning text burned in my pocket like a secret. Sarah went to work at her marketing firm, where she was up for a promotion she'd been working toward for 2 years. The same promotion Grandma Rose had once called unseemly for a woman who should be thinking about babies instead. The thoughts were getting louder. What if Grandma Rose had seen something I'd missed? What if Sarah's ambition, her independence, her desire to wait 5 years before having kids, What if all of that was wrong for the kind of man I was supposed to be? Melissa worked part-time at a florist shop and talked about wanting nothing more than a husband who'd let her stay home with future children. She posted pictures of elaborate meals she cooked just for herself, talked about missing, old-fashioned romance, and traditional gender roles, everything Grandma Rose had wanted for me. The first time we met in person I told Sarah I was visiting Jake to talk about the inheritance. Another lie in what was becoming a web of deception. Melissa and I met at a coffee shop halfway between our towns, and the moment I saw her, I felt something I hadn't experienced with Sarah in months, guilt. But also excitement. The thrill of something forbidden, some that felt like rebellion against the life I'd carefully built. You look exactly the same, she said, hugging me a little too long. Remember when we went to prom together? You were so nervous you spilled punch on my dress. I remembered. I also remembered why we'd broken up senior year. Melissa had wanted to get married right after graduation, start a family immediately, build the kind of life my teenage self had found suffocating. Now, sitting across from her in that coffee shop, those same qualities felt like coming home. We talked for 3 hours. About her divorce from a man who'd wanted her to work full time while still handling all the housework. About my confusion over the inheritance and what it meant about everything I'd believed about love and family. About the loneliness we'd both been feeling, the sense that we'd somehow taken wrong turns somewhere along the way. When she reached across the table and touched my hand I didn't pull away. I always wondered what would happen if we'd stayed together, she said softly. If we'd been brave enough to build the life we both wanted instead of trying to become people we're not. I knew I should have left then. Should have driven straight home to Sarah, confessed everything, begged for forgiveness for even entertaining these thoughts. Instead I heard myself saying, maybe we can find out. The first time we kissed was in the parking lot of that coffee shop. 15 minutes of making out like teenagers while my fiancé was at work, probably thinking about flower arrangements for our wedding. I drove home that day with Melissa's lipstick on my collar and self-hatred in my stomach. Sarah was cooking dinner when I walked in, humming some song she'd been playing nonstop lately. She looked up and smiled, and for a moment I saw her the way I used to. Beautiful, brilliant, everything I'd ever wanted. How did it go with Jake? She asked, stirring something that smelled incredible. Did you guys work anything out? Not really. I said, which was true in the most technical sense. It's complicated. She nodded sympathetically and went back to cooking. That's who Sarah was. Understanding, supportive, willing to give me space to process trauma in my own way. She deserved so much better than what I was becoming. But I couldn't stop. Over the next month, Melissa and I met 6 more times. Coffee dates turned into lunch dates turned into long drives through the countryside where we'd park and make out like the world was ending. She'd run her fingers through my hair and tell me I was exactly the kind of man she'd been praying for. Traditional, protective, ready to build something real and lasting. Your grandmother sounds like she was an amazing woman, Melissa said one afternoon as we sat by a lake, my arm around her shoulders. She probably saw that you needed someone who'd appreciate the old-fashioned values she raised you with. The words felt like in medicine at the same time. Because they were slowly my relationship with Sarah. Medicine because they soothed the ache of feeling rejected and unworthy that had been eating at me since the will reading. Sarah started planning our wedding with more intensity. As if she could sense something slipping away and was trying to hold on tighter. She'd show me venue photos over breakfast and talk about the life we'd build together. The trips we'd take, the careers we'd build, the eventual children we'd raise to be independent and strong. All I could think about was Melissa talking about making fresh bread every morning and teaching her daughters to bake while her sons learned to fix cars with their father. The night everything fell apart started like any other. Sarah was working late on a presentation for a promotion review. I told her I was going out with college friends. Another lie. Melissa and I met at a hotel bar 20 minutes from home, far enough away that we wouldn't run into anyone who knew us. I can't keep doing this, I said as soon as I saw her. This is wrong. I'm getting married in 4 months. She nodded sadly. I know, I've been thinking the same thing. It's just, being with you feels like the life I was supposed to have. Like maybe your grandmother's spirit brought us back together for a reason. We both knew it was our last night together. The goodbye kiss in the hotel parking lot turned into something more desperate, more final. When she suggested we get a room just to talk privately, just to have a real goodbye away from prying eyes, I said yes. I told myself it was just talking. Just closure. Just a way to end this chapter cleanly so I could go back to Sarah and be the man she deserved. But hotels aren't for talking, and desperate people don't make rational decisions. I woke up the next morning with Melissa curled against my chest, her engagement ring from her failed marriage glinting on the nightstand next to my own engagement ring. The weight of what I'd done crashed over me like a tsunami. I'd cheated on the woman I was supposed to marry in 4 months. I'd betrayed the person who'd held my hand through my grandmother's funeral, who'd supported me through every crisis, who'd never given me a reason to doubt her love. I'd become exactly the kind of man my parents had raised me not to be. Melissa stirred awake and smiled at me like we were newlyweds on our honeymoon. Good morning, handsome. How did you sleep? This was a mistake, I said, already reaching for my clothes. This whole thing was a massive mistake. Her face crumpled. Don't say that. Last night was beautiful. It felt right. Nothing about this is right. I snapped, hating myself for the cruelty in my voice. I'm engaged to someone else. Someone who loves me and trusts me and deserves better than this. I left her crying in that hotel room and drove home through the morning rush hour traffic, practicing what I'd say to Sarah. How I'd confess, how I'd beg for forgiveness, how I'd spend the rest of my life making it up to her. But when I walked into our apartment, Sarah was sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open, surrounded by wedding planning materials. She looked up with that radiant smile that had made me fall in love with her 5 years ago. Perfect timing, she said excitedly. I just heard back from the venue and they had a cancellation for the date we wanted. We can move the wedding up by 2 months if we want. Isn't that amazing? The words hit me like a physical. A wedding in 2 months. 2 months to pretend I wasn't a cheating scumbag who'd betrayed the best person in my life. 2 months to lie to her face every single day. That's great, I managed to say. Really great. She launched into details about catering and flowers and guest lists, and all I could do was nod and smile while my soul rotted from the inside out. I never told her about Melissa. I told myself I was protecting her from unnecessary pain, that confessing would only hurt for no reason since it was over. But really, I was protecting myself from losing her before I was ready to face the consequences. The coward's way out, dressed up as nobility. The wedding was beautiful. Sarah looked like something out of a fairy tale, radiant and glowing with happiness as she walked down the aisle toward me. Our friends and family filled every pew, beaming at us like we were the poster couple for true love. I stood there in my tuxedo, watching the woman I'd betrayed glide toward me in her grandmother's dress, and felt like the biggest who'd ever lived. When the officiant asked if anyone had reason why we shouldn't be married, I held my breath, half hoping someone would stand up and expose me for what I was. No one did. Sarah said, Ido with tears in her eyes. I said it back with acid in my throat. We honeymooned in Italy, a trip she'd planned down to every detail. She took pictures of everything, gushing about how perfect our life was going to be, how lucky we were to have found each other. I smiled for the cameras and made love to my new wife while thinking about another woman, hating myself more with each passing day. For 8 months, I played the role of devoted husband. I myself into work, hoping exhaustion would drown out the guilt. Sarah got her promotion and started talking about buying a house, maybe starting a family in a few years. She was building our future while I was still trapped in the wreckage of my betrayal. Melissa texted me twice during those months. Once to congratulate me on my marriage after seeing the photos on social media. Once to tell me she was moving across the country for a fresh start. I deleted both messages without responding, but not before reading them 17 times each. The truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how deep you try to bury it. It came out on a random Tuesday evening when Sarah was scrolling through her phone while I cooked dinner. She made a small noise of confusion then went very quiet. She said, her voice careful and controlled. Can you come here for a second? I found her staring at her phone with a look I'd never seen before. Not quite anger, not quite, something colder. More dangerous. Remember my friend Jessica from college? She just moved to Denver and was telling me about her new neighborhood. She mentioned meeting this woman at a coffee shop, a florist named Melissa who just moved from our area. Apparently, this woman recognized Jess from my social media and started asking questions about us. My turn to ice water. She wanted to know if we were happy. If our marriage was as perfect as it looked online. And then, Sarah's voice got very quiet. She said she was glad you'd chosen the right path. Because she'd been worried about you during our engagement. Said you'd seemed so confused about what you wanted back then. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I could hear the smoke detector beeping in the hallway, the neighbor's dog barking, the sound of my marriage cracking apart like ice under too much weight. I need to ask you something, Sarah said, still staring at her phone. And I need you to tell me the truth. Did you have an affair during our engagement? I could have lied, could have manufactured outrage at the accusation, demanded to know why she'd believe some stranger over her own husband. Could have gaslit her into doubting her own instincts. Instead, looking at her face, at the woman who'd loved me unconditionally for 5 years, I finally found a shred of the man my parents had raised me to be. Yes, I whispered. The sound she made wasn't quite a sob, wasn't quite a scream. It was something more primal than that. The sound of a heart breaking in real time. What followed was the worst conversation of my life. Sarah demanded details with the methodical precision of someone documenting evidence for a trial. How long, how many times, whether I loved Melissa, whether our entire marriage had been built on a lie. I answered every question with brutal honesty, watching my wife's face transform from to rage to something worse than both. Disgust. By the time I finished confessing, she was looking at me like I was a stranger who'd broken into her home. 8 months. She said, her voice hollow. I've been married to you for 8 months, believing we had something real, and the whole time you've been carrying around this secret. Making love to me with another woman on your conscience. I never contacted her after the wedding. I said desperately. Mate, nothing. It was a mistake, a moment of weakness after the inheritance thing messed with my head. It meant nothing. Sarah's voice rose to a shriek. You away 5 years together for something that meant nothing. You married me while thinking about another woman for something that meant nothing. She was crying now, huge tears that she wiped away angrily, like she was furious at herself for showing weakness in front of me. Get out, she said quietly. Sarah, please, we can work through this. Couples survive infidelity all the time. I'll do counseling. I'll do whatever it takes. Oat. The scream tore out of her throat like she was exorcising a demon. Get out of my sight before I do something we'll both regret. I packed a bag and went to stay at my brother Jake's place. The same brother who'd inherited everything, who now had to watch his little brother's life fall apart in real time. He didn't say much, just handed me and let me crash on his couch. The next morning, I found divorce papers slipped under his front door. Sarah didn't want alimony, didn't want half my assets, didn't want anything except to erase me from her life as completely as possible. She kept her ring, not out of sentimentality but because she said she'd earned it by wasting 5 years on a man who wasn't worth her time. The worst part wasn't losing her, though that felt like having my chest cracked open with a crowbar. The worst part was watching her tell our friends and families what I'd done. Sarah wasn't vindictive about it, didn't embellish or try to make me look worse than I was. She just told the truth in that calm, professional voice she used for business presentations. Our mutual friends chose sides quickly. Most chose her because of course they did. She was the victim, and I was the cheating husband who'd thrown away a perfect marriage for a meaningless fling. Our families were more divided, but even my own relatives looked at me with disappointment and shame. The wedding photos came down from social media. The house we talked about buying together went to another couple. The future we'd planned together evaporated like it had never existed. I tried dating again after 6 months, but every woman I met felt like a consolation prize. I'd had something real and precious, and I'd destroyed it for a fantasy that lasted exactly one night. Melissa never contacted me again, probably because she'd realized what kind of man I actually was when I abandoned her in that hotel room. Sarah moved across the country for a fresh start. I heard through mutual friends that she was doing well, had gotten another promotion, was dating someone new. Someone who deserved her in ways I never had. A year later, Jake got married. I was his best man, standing next to him at the altar while he promised to love and cherish and remain faithful to his bride. The irony wasn't lost on me. He'd inherited Grandma Rose's money and her values, and he was building the kind of life she'd wanted for both of us. I was alone at 30, living in a one-bedroom apartment, eating takeout for dinner while scrolling through social media posts of former classmates with their families and careers and meaningful relationships. Everything I'd had and thrown away for one night of feeling like someone else's priority. The inheritance that had started it all. Jake ended up giving me half anyway, said it wasn't right for Grandma Rose's backwards thinking to come between us. The money sits in my savings account untouched. Money from a woman whose love came with conditions I'd never understood until it was too late. Sometimes I wonder if she'd be proud of how I turned out. Her grandson who valued tradition and family legacy so much that he destroyed his own family to chase a ghost of what she thought he should want. Her golden boy who learned too late that love without respect is just manipulation wrapped in pretty paper. But mostly I try not to think about Grandma Rose at all. Because every time I do I remember that I became exactly the kind of man she'd raised me to be. Someone who thought his wants mattered more than other people's hearts. Someone who believed his confusion gave him the right to betray the people who loved him most. Sarah deserved better than me from the beginning. She deserved a man who'd choose her every day. Not just when it was convenient. She deserved someone who'd see her ambition as strength, not a threat to his fragile masculinity. She deserved a love that didn't come with conditions or expiration dates. She deserved the kind of love I thought I was giving her. Right up until the moment I proved I wasn't capable of it. Now I'm 32, sitting alone in an apartment that smells like frozen dinners and regret, writing this as a warning to anyone who thinks they can build a real life on a foundation of lies. You can't. The truth always surfaces eventually, and when it does, it takes everything good with it when it goes.